The arrogant executive approached with his usual smirk, ready to flaunt his success. But when three identical toddlers looked up at him with his exact green eyes and called out, "Mommy, who's that?" his legs gave out as shocked shoppers rushed to help. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel, and let's get started. Alexandria Johnson stood in front of the bathroom mirror of her cramped Bronx apartment, her trembling fingers gripping the plastic pregnancy test. The two pink lines had appeared 3 minutes ago, but she'd been staring at them for what felt like hours, watching as they darkened with certainty against the white background. "Breathe," she whispered to herself, adjusting the crisp white blouse she'd ironed 3 times that morning. At 22, she was the youngest executive assistant at Anderson Global, a position she'd earned through relentless determination and exceptional skill, not through the relationship that had developed between her and Michael Anderson, the company's 35-year-old CEO. Alexandria tucked the test into her designer handbag, a splurge purchased with her first bonus, and studied her reflection. Her dark skin was flawless, her natural hair pulled back into a sleek bun that took 40 minutes to perfect. She'd chosen her outfit carefully: conservative navy pencil skirt, white blouse, and the pearl earrings her grandmother had given her upon graduation from college. She looked professional, capable, and nothing like the scared young woman she felt inside. The memory of their first encounter after hours flooded back uninvited. It had been 6 months ago. She'd stayed late finishing quarterly reports when Michael emerged from his office, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up. "Still here, Alexandria?" he'd asked, leaning against her desk with casual intimacy. "These reports need to be perfect for tomorrow's meeting, Mr. Anderson." He'd smiled then, that devastating smile that transformed his austere features into something almost warm. "Michael, please. It's after hours." That night, he'd invited her into his office to review the reports. By midnight, the papers lay forgotten on his mahogany desk as his hands traced the curve of her spine. What had followed were months of secretive meetings, late nights at the office, rendezvous in luxury hotels during business trips, whispered promises and passionate encounters. Michael was careful. They were never seen together outside the professional context. But in private moments, he'd spoken of her brilliance, her potential, how she was different from other women he'd known. Alexandria blinked away the memories and checked her watch, a knockoff Cartier she'd purchased from a street vendor. 7:45. She needed to leave now to make it to Manhattan by 9. The subway car was packed with morning commuters, construction workers, nannies, office workers, all headed to build, maintain, or service the glittering island of Manhattan. Alexandria held onto a pole, one hand protectively hovering over her still flat stomach. Her mind raced through scenarios, rehearsing words, anticipating responses. The gleaming Anderson Global headquarters loomed 70 stories above Madison Avenue, its glass and steel exterior reflecting the December morning sunlight. Alexandria's student ID from her computer science degree was still in her wallet, a degree she'd put on hold to accept this prestigious position, seeing it as a faster track to success than entry-level programming jobs. In the marble lobby, she nodded to security guards who knew her by name. "Morning, Miss Johnson. Cold one today." "Sure is, Frank. Stay warm." The executive elevator whisked her to the 68th floor. With each ascending floor, Alexandria straightened her spine a little more, lifted her chin a little higher. By the time the doors opened to the executive suite, she was no longer a frightened young woman from the Harlem projects. She was Alexandria Johnson, executive assistant to Michael Anderson, with a future bright enough to blind. Or so she believed. The morning passed in a blur of meetings, calls, and coordinated chaos that Alexandria managed with practiced efficiency, all while the pregnancy test burned like a brand inside her handbag. She'd caught Michael's eye during the morning briefing, a brief electric connection before he turned his attention back to the board members. At 2:30, when Michael's calendar showed a rare hour of unscheduled time, Alexandria took a deep breath and knocked on his office door. "Come in," his deep voice commanded. Michael's corner office showcased Manhattan through floor-to-ceiling windows. The city sprawled beneath them like a conquered kingdom. He sat behind a massive mahogany desk, his tall frame draped in a bespoke suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. "Alexandria," he said, his tone warming slightly. "What can I do for you?" She closed the door behind her, heart hammering against her ribs. "I need to speak with you about something personal, Michael." He glanced at his watch, a genuine Patek Philippe. "I have a call with Tokyo in 40 minutes. This won't take long." Alexandria moved to stand directly in front of his desk, refusing to sit, needing whatever height advantage she could maintain. "I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air between them. For a moment, the only sound was the faint hum of the heating system and the muted honking of taxis far below. Michael's expression remained unchanged as he leaned back in his leather chair. He studied her with those penetrating green eyes that had once looked at her with desire. Now they assessed her like a problematic line item on a financial report. "I see," he finally said. "And you're certain it's mine?" The question slapped her with unexpected force. "Of course it's yours. There hasn't been anyone else." Michael nodded slowly, steepling his fingers beneath his chin. "How far along?" "About 8 weeks." "And you're sure about keeping it?" "There are options, Alexandria." She hadn't expected him to fall to his knees with joy, but his clinical detachment chilled her. "I wanted to discuss those options with you. We never talked about what this us was exactly. But I thought, what exactly did you think?" His voice remained even, but a new edge had crept in. "That we had some kind of future together?" Alexandria straightened her shoulders. "You told me I was special, different from the others." A smile touched his lips, but it never reached his eyes. "You are special, Alexandria. You're an exceptional assistant." The word assistant landed like a body blow. She took a steadying breath. "Michael, this isn't just about us. There's a baby now." He sighed, pressing a button on his phone. "Jennifer, push my Tokyo call back 30 minutes. He rose from his chair and walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back as he gazed out at the empire of skyscrapers. "A pregnant black secretary doesn't align with the image I'm building for this company." Alexandria felt the air rush from her lungs. "What?" "Let's be adults about this," Michael continued, turning to face her. "We had some fun. You're a beautiful woman, but surely you understand the realities of our situation." "Realities?" Alexandria repeated, her voice barely audible. "I'm engaged to Catherine Reynolds. The merger between our families will create the largest financial consulting firm on the East Coast." He said it matter-of-factly, as if discussing the weather. Alexandria felt the room tilt beneath her feet. "Engaged? Since when?" "It's been arranged for months. The announcement goes public next week." He returned to his desk, opening a drawer. "You're a smart woman, Alexandria. You understand business. Sometimes personal sacrifices are necessary for greater goals." "Personal sacrifices?" Her voice cracked. "This is our child." Michael pulled out a checkbook and began writing. "What did you expect? That I'd leave my fiancée, an heiress to the Reynolds fortune, to raise a bastard with a girl from Harlem?" His laugh was sharp, devoid of humor. "Be realistic." The check slid across the polished mahogany surface. $50,000 for your problem, and perhaps for you to return to where you belong. Alexandria stared at the check, unable to move. "It's not a problem. It's our baby." "There is no our in any context of this situation," Michael replied coldly, pressing the intercom button. "Security, please escort Miss Johnson to the exit. She no longer works with us." "You're firing me?" Disbelief colored her voice. "That's illegal." "Actually, New York is an at-will employment state, and your position requires discretion and judgment. Qualities you've clearly demonstrated a lack of by pursuing a relationship with your superior." His voice was pure corporate efficiency now. "The severance is generous. Most women in your position would be grateful." 2 security guards entered the office before Alexandria could respond. "Please ensure Miss Johnson leaves the premises immediately," Michael instructed them. He turned to Alexandria one last time. "You'll never be anything more than a ghetto girl with ambitions beyond your capabilities. That money is for you to disappear from my life." The guard stepped forward, professionally detached. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us." Alexandria stood frozen, dignity battling with devastation. She left the check lying on the desk. "Keep your money. I don't need it." Michael shrugged. "Pride won't feed a baby, Alexandria. Take the check." She hesitated, then snatched it, crumpling it in her fist. It was blood money, but he was right. Pride wouldn't pay for prenatal vitamins or diapers. The walk through the bustling office floor was the longest of Alexandria's life. Curious eyes followed as security escorted her to her desk, watching silently as they handed her a cardboard box for her belongings. Her framed computer science degree, a potted succulent, a spare pair of heels, the pitiful collection of a life interrupted. In the elevator, Alexandria held herself rigidly, refusing to break. In the lobby, she kept her chin high as she passed Frank at security. "Everything okay, Miss Johnson?" he asked, concern creasing his weathered face. "Just fine, Frank. Stay warm." Outside, December wind sliced through her wool coat. She stumbled to a nearby park bench, the box of belongings heavy in her arms. Only then, as taxis splashed through slush and pedestrians hurried past without a glance, did Alexandria allow the first tears to fall. The subway back to the Bronx was crowded with afternoon commuters. Alexandria sat clutching her box, the crumpled check burning in her pocket. Through tear-blurred eyes, she watched Manhattan's skyline recede, the Anderson Global Tower standing like a monument to everything she'd lost. In her tiny bedroom in the apartment she shared with 2 roommates, Alexandria finally allowed herself to break down completely. Sobs racked her body as she curled around her still flat stomach, mourning dreams she hadn't even fully formed yet. Hours later, as night fell over the city, Alexandria stood at her grimy window. Manhattan glittered in the distance, beautiful and cruel. She pressed one hand against the cold glass, the other resting protectively over her womb. "He says I'll never be anything," she whispered to her unborn child. "We're going to prove him wrong on every count. One day, he'll look at me, at us, and understand exactly what he threw away." As the subway rumbled toward the Bronx, Alexandria couldn't possibly imagine that 15 years later she would be returning to Manhattan not as a rejected secretary, but as the billionaire who would buy the company of the man who had discarded her. The night air felt damp against Alexandria's skin as she stood at the window, her promise to her unborn child still hanging in the small bedroom. The glittering Manhattan skyline seemed to mock her from across the river, so close, yet impossibly distant now. She placed the crumpled check on her nightstand, wondering how $50,000 could simultaneously feel like so much and so little for the price of her dignity. The next morning, Alexandria awoke with renewed determination. She would need a new job immediately. Her roommate's sympathetic glances over breakfast told her they'd heard her crying, but neither mentioned it. "I've got some interviews lined up," Alexandria announced, spreading her resume on the kitchen table. Her hand unconsciously drifted to her stomach, still flat, still secret. 3 days later, seated in the waiting room of Brookfield Financial, Alexandria smoothed her skirt nervously. The interview had gone well until the inevitable question. "And why did you leave Anderson Global?" The HR manager's voice was pleasant, but direct. Alexandria had prepared for this. "I was ready for new challenges." "Interesting. According to our records, you were terminated." The woman's expression hardened. "We contacted Anderson Global for a reference check." Alexandria's heart sank. "There were circumstances. I'm sorry, Ms. Johnson, but we require complete honesty from our applicants. And frankly, Any termination from a company like Anderson raises significant red flags. The scene repeated itself across Manhattan over the next 2 weeks, each rejection more painful than the last. By the third week, Alexandria had downgraded her applications from executive assistant positions to administrative roles, then to receptionist openings. The results remained the same. As soon as her former employer was contacted, doors closed. Her roommate Jade found her hunched over the toilet one morning, retching violently. "Morning sickness or job hunt sickness?" Jade asked, holding Alexandria's hair back. Alexandria wiped her mouth. "Both." "You need to see a doctor," Jade said, helping her to her feet. "With what insurance? Mine expired with my termination." Alexandria splashed cold water on her face. "Besides, I need to save every penny now." Jade's expression softened. "Alex, you've got that check." Alexandria stared at her reflection. The circles under her eyes had darkened, her cheekbones more prominent after weeks of stress and morning sickness. "That money is for the baby, and for a fresh start far away from Michael Anderson." That afternoon, Alexandria counted out cash from her dwindling savings and visited a community health clinic in the Bronx. The waiting room was crowded with mothers balancing fussy toddlers and pregnant women in various stages. Alexandria felt oddly comforted among them, all women navigating challenging circumstances with determination. 2 hours later, the nurse called her name. In the cramped examination room, an older doctor with kind eyes performed an ultrasound. Her practiced movements faltered as she moved the wand across Alexandria's abdomen. She murmured, adjusting something on the monitor. Alexandria's heart rate spiked. "Is something wrong with my baby?" The doctor's smile was gentle. "Not wrong, just more than expected." She turned the monitor. "See these 3 separate sacs? Congratulations, Ms. Johnson. You're expecting triplets." The world seemed to tilt beneath Alexandria. "Triplets? That's impossible. Rare, certainly, but not impossible." The doctor pointed to 3 distinct fluttering heartbeats. "All appear healthy at this stage." Alexandria stumbled from the clinic in a daze, clutching the grainy ultrasound printout. 3 babies. Not 1 life to support, but 3. The enormity of her situation crashed over her like a tsunami. She sank onto a bench at a nearby bus stop, calculating and recalculating her dwindling resources. That evening, her second roommate Tasha greeted her with an uncomfortable expression. "Alex, we need to talk about rent." Alexandria's stomach nodded. "I know I'm 2 weeks late. I'll have it by Friday." Tasha shifted awkwardly. "The thing is, Jade and I already covered for you last month, and my cousin needs a place to stay. She can pay on time." The unspoken message hung in the air. Alexandria nodded slowly. "When do you need me out?" "End of the month." Tasha looked genuinely regretful. "I'm really sorry." By the following week, Alexandria had secured 3 jobs: morning barista at a cafe 8 blocks away, afternoon telemarketing for a credit card company, and night data entry for a law firm that needed documents digitized. Between shifts, she searched for affordable housing, eventually finding a dingy room in a boarding house near the cafe. It wasn't much: a twin bed, a wobbly desk, and a shared bathroom down the hall. But it was within her budget. Her first morning at Sunshine Cafe began at 4:30. Alexandria tied the green apron over her expanding waistline, grateful that the loose uniform still concealed her pregnancy. "First day jitters?" asked Marco, the middle-aged manager who'd hired her. Alexandria nodded, fighting a wave of nausea. "A little. You'll do fine. Just smile and remember, the customer is always right, even when they're completely wrong." He winked, then demonstrated the espresso machine. By 7:30, the morning rush hit in full force. Wall Street types barked orders while checking emails. Students frantically reviewed notes while waiting for their caffeine fix. Construction workers grabbed coffee and pastries before heading to job sites. Alexandria's feet ached. Her back throbbed. and the smell of coffee intensified her nausea, but she maintained her professional smile. "Grande soy latte, extra hot, light foam," she called out, sliding the cup across the counter. The customer, a woman in a tailored suit similar to one Alexandria once owned, didn't look up from her phone. That took forever. "Do you people not understand that some of us have actual careers?" Alexandria swallowed her retort. "I apologize for the wait. Have a wonderful day." By her third hour, the non-stop pace and morning sickness combined into a dangerous cocktail. Alexandria swayed slightly, grabbing the counter for support as black spots danced before her eyes. "Whoa there!" Marco appeared at her side, gently guiding her to the back room. "Sit down before you fall down." Alexandria collapsed onto a plastic chair, embarrassed and terrified of losing another job. "I'm fine, just got a little dizzy." Marco handed her a glass of water. "Take 5 minutes. The morning rush is almost over." "I can't afford to take breaks," Alexandria protested, struggling to rise. "You can't afford to faint into the espresso machine either," Marco countered firmly. 5 minutes." Alexandria sipped the water, fighting tears of gratitude and humiliation. 5 minutes. When had her life contracted to counting minutes of rest between exhausting jobs that barely covered her expenses? A customer's irritated voice carried from the front. "Is anyone actually working here? I've been waiting 3 minutes for my coffee." "Coming right up, sir," Marco called, giving Alexandria's shoulder a squeeze before hurrying back. When her shift ended at 11, Alexandria ducked into the employee bathroom to change for her telemarketing job. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her complexion had a grayish undertone. She splashed water on her face and reapplied mascara and lipstick, armor against the world that now seemed determined to crush her. The telemarketing center was a fluorescent-lit room filled with cubicles where dozens of employees recited identical scripts into headsets. Alexandria settled into her assigned space, trying to ignore the cramps that periodically seized her lower back. "Remember, it's not a no until they hang up," the floor supervisor instructed, hovering behind her. "And for God's sake, sound enthusiastic." For 4 hours, Alexandria pitched credit cards to increasingly hostile strangers. Each rejection cut deeper, personal now in a way it never had been during her prior professional life. Between calls, she caught herself dozing, only to be jolted awake by the automatic dialer connecting another call. "Miss Johnson!" The supervisor's sharp voice startled her. "This is your second warning about sleeping between calls. One more, and you're done here." Alexandria straightened, fighting exhaustion. It won't happen again. By 6:30, she was walking 6 blocks to the law firm where she'd been hired for overnight data entry. The office was mostly empty, just a security guard and a few associates working late. Alexandria was shown to a small room with outdated computers where boxes of legal documents awaited digitization. "The system's pretty straightforward," explained the office manager. "Just scan each page and enter the relevant data fields. We need these done by morning." Alexandria nodded, eyeing the mountain of papers. The pay was better than her other jobs, $18 an hour, but the work was mind-numbing. Her eyes burned as she scanned document after document, the baby weight already making it difficult to sit comfortably for hours. At 2 in the morning, while scanning a particularly tedious contract, Alexandria noticed a book abandoned on a nearby shelf. Advanced Digital Security Algorithms, Protecting Corporate Data in the Digital Age. Her computer science training stirred something inside her. Before being reduced to a secretary, she had dreamed of coding innovative security systems. She reached for the book, flipping through pages of complex code and security frameworks. Something clicked in her mind, a potential solution to a vulnerability she'd noticed in Anderson Global's system during her time there. Alexandria found a notepad and began scribbling equations and code snippets. Dawn found her hunched over the desk, surrounded by completed scans and pages of notes. The night security guard poked his head in. "You okay, miss? Been here all night?" Alexandria blinked, returning to reality. "Yes, just finishing up." She quickly gathered her notes, tucking them into her bag alongside the borrowed book. The tiny room at the boarding house welcomed her with depressing familiarity. Alexandria kicked off her shoes, too exhausted to undress fully. 4 hours until her next shift at the cafe. She set her alarm and collapsed onto the narrow bed, one hand resting protectively on her expanding midsection. 7 months pregnant, Alexandria stood in her room, the window's condensation obscuring her view of Manhattan. Her reflection showed what looked like a woman about to give birth to a small basketball team, her belly enormous with the triplets who seemed determined to stretch her skin to impossible limits. She'd been let go from the cafe 2 weeks earlier. "You're scaring the customers, dear," but had managed to keep the telemarketing and data entry positions. The borrowed security algorithm book had become her lifeline, a connection to the future she'd once imagined for herself. Alexandria turned away from the window and settled at her desk, a wobbly card table purchased from a thrift store. Beside it sat her most valuable possession, a used laptop bought from a pawn shop, its processing power barely adequate but sufficient for coding. Between bouts of typing, Alexandria massaged her lower back, wincing at the pain that had become her constant companion. On the screen, lines of code represented something more than just a security protocol. They were her declaration of independence, her refusal to be defined by Michael's rejection. She caressed her enormous belly, feeling the synchronized movement of 3 tiny bodies beneath her hands. "He said I would never be anything," she whispered to her unborn children, her voice fierce despite her exhaustion. "I'm going to prove him wrong in every way. One day he will look at me and you and understand exactly what he lost." With her feet swollen and her back screaming in protest, Alexandria turned back to her coding, unaware that the algorithm she was creating between exhausting shifts would become the foundation of a $12 billion technology empire. The pain came like a lightning bolt, sudden, electric, and all-consuming. Alexandria bolted upright in her narrow bed, gasping as the contraction seized her body. Her hands clutched her enormous belly, now stretched taut at 7 months with 3 lives growing inside her. This wasn't right. It was too soon. "No, no, no," she whispered, panic rising as she felt wetness between her legs. Her waters had broken. Alexandria fumbled for her phone with trembling hands. No one to call, no partner waiting anxiously to drive her to the hospital, no family nearby to hold her hand. Another contraction ripped through her, and she couldn't suppress the scream that tore from her throat. A fist pounded on the thin wall. "Keep it down in there! People are trying to sleep!" shouted her neighbor. Alexandria managed to pull herself to her feet, one hand braced against the wall for support. She needed to get to the hospital. Now, the triplets were coming 2 months early, more pounding, this time on her door. Alexandria stumbled toward it, clutching her belly. "What in God's name is all that racket?" Mrs. Patel, her elderly neighbor, stood in the hallway, her expression shifting from irritation to alarm as she took in Alexandria's state. "Oh, child, the babies?" Alexandria nodded, unable to speak as another contraction gripped her. Mrs. Patel moved with surprising speed for a woman in her 70s, slipping an arm around Alexandria's waist. "My son is a taxi driver. He's just dropped me off. He's still downstairs," she said, helping Alexandria toward the stairs. "Lean on me, Beta. 1 step at a time." The journey down 3 flights of stairs was an eternity of pain and fear. By the time they reached the street, Alexandria was drenched in sweat, her simple cotton dress clinging to her shaking body. Mrs. Patel's son jumped out of his yellow cab. "Mama, what's—" His eyes widened at the sight of Alexandria. "Hospital? Bronx, Lebanon," Alexandria managed between gasps. "Please hurry." The taxi tore through the pre-dawn streets of the Bronx, weaving between delivery trucks and early commuters. Alexandria lay across the back seat, her hands protectively curved around her belly. "Don't come yet," she whispered to her babies. "Please just hold on a little longer." The hospital emergency entrance was a blur of bright lights and urgent voices. Alexandria was transferred to a gurney, an oxygen mask placed over her face. 22-year-old female, 7 months pregnant with triplets, premature labor, a nurse recited as they wheeled her through swinging doors. In the delivery room, chaos erupted. Monitors beeped, medical staff rushed in, voices overlapped in a cacophony of medical terminology. Blood pressure dropping. First baby's heart rate decreasing. We need to move now. Prep for emergency C-section. Alexandria felt disconnected from her body, floating above the frantic scene. Her eyes fixed on a young doctor who leaned over her, his face serious. Ms. Johnson, your babies are in distress. We need to perform an emergency cesarean. Do you understand? Alexandria nodded weakly. Save them, she whispered. Please, save my babies. We'll do everything we can, he promised, squeezing her hand briefly before the anesthesiologist moved in. The cold spread of anesthesia was the last thing Alexandria remembered before darkness claimed her. She woke to the steady beep of monitors. The pain was different now, a dull, surgical ache across her abdomen. Alexandria blinked against the harsh hospital lights, memories flooding back. My babies, she croaked, her throat parched. Where are my babies? A nurse appeared at her bedside, adjusting an IV drip. They're in the NICU, Neonatal Intensive Care Unit. They're very small, but they're fighters. Are they alive? Alexandria's voice broke on the question. All 3 made it through delivery, the nurse assured her. 3 little boys, but I won't sugarcoat it. They're premature and facing challenges. The next 48 hours will be critical. Tears slid down Alexandria's cheeks. When can I see them? Let's get you stabilized first, then we'll take you to them. 6 hours later, Alexandria was wheeled into the NICU. Nothing could have prepared her for the sight of her 3 tiny sons, each in a separate incubator, connected to a bewildering array of tubes and monitors. They were impossibly small, their translucent skin revealing the delicate network of veins beneath. They're so tiny, she whispered, reaching out toward the nearest incubator. Baby A weighs 3 pounds 2 ounces, explained the NICU nurse. Babies B and C are slightly smaller at just under 3 pounds each. Alexandria stared at the 3 little bodies fighting for life. Despite their precarious state, a fierce love surged through her. Can I touch them? The nurse nodded. You can place your hands through these openings. Just be very gentle. Alexandria slipped her hand into the first incubator, her finger lightly touching her son's miniature palm. To her amazement, tiny fingers curled reflexively around hers. That's it, the nurse encouraged. He knows his mama's touch. For the next 2 weeks, Alexandria practically lived at the hospital. She learned to feed her sons through tubes, to change diapers no bigger than her palm, to read the monitors that tracked their vital signs. Between feeding sessions, she sat beside their incubators, programming on her laptop or reading to them from medical journals, textbooks, anything she could find. One evening, a compassionate nurse named Elena found Alexandria asleep in a chair, her laptop balanced precariously on her knees. You need proper rest, Elena said gently. Your body is still recovering too. Alexandria shook her head. I can't leave them. Elena studied her for a moment. They need names, you know. It's not good for the charts to keep calling them baby A, B, and C. Alexandria looked at her 3 sons. Despite their identical medical challenges, she was beginning to see their distinct personalities emerging. Baby A, the largest, seemed to fight the hardest against his tubes and monitors. Baby B responded dramatically to music played in the NICU. Baby C watched everything with an intensity that seemed impossible for a newborn. I've been thinking about it, Alexandria admitted. They need strong names, names with purpose and meaning. She moved to the first incubator. This one is Elijah. It means Yahweh is God. He's my firstborn, my fighter. Moving to the second incubator, she touched it gently. Isaiah, salvation of the Lord. He seems to find peace in music and voices. Finally, she stood before the third incubator. And Emmanuel, God is with us. He observes everything, taking it all in. Elena smiled. Beautiful names for beautiful boys. As the days passed, Alexandria established a routine. Mornings with the triplets, afternoons working remotely as a data entry clerk, evenings back at the NICU. During those long hospital nights, she continued developing her security algorithm, the lines of code flowing from her fingers as she sat beside her sleeping sons. A month after their birth, Alexandria was changing Elijah's impossibly small diaper when she noticed something that made her freeze. His eyes, previously the unfocused blue of most newborns, had begun to change. The unmistakable emerald green, Michael's green, stared back at her. Over the next few days, she confirmed that all three boys shared the same distinctive eye color. The genetic marker of their father was undeniable. Alone in the hospital bathroom, Alexandria allowed herself a moment of weakness, tears streaming down her face. "He'll never know," she whispered to her reflection. "He'll never know what he threw away." After 6 weeks in the NICU, the triplets were finally strong enough to go home. On the day of discharge, a social worker named Mara requested a meeting with Alexandria. "Ms. Johnson," Mara began, her tone professional but kind, "I need to understand your support system. 3 premature infants require extraordinary care." Alexandria sat straighter in her chair. "I have arrangements in place." "May I ask what those are? Family members helping? Hired assistants?" "I'll be caring for them myself while working remotely," Alexandria explained. "I've calculated the feeding schedules, medical follow-ups, and financial requirements." Mara looked skeptical. "How do you plan to support 3 babies on your own?" Alexandria opened her laptop, turning it to show the social worker her screen. "This is my security algorithm. It addresses vulnerabilities in current corporate data protection systems. I've been developing it throughout my pregnancy and during our NICU stay." Mara looked confused. "I don't understand how this relates to your ability to care for triplets." "This algorithm is the future of cybersecurity," Alexandria stated with quiet confidence. "I've already received interest from a small tech firm. It's going to support us while I build something greater." Despite the social worker's doubts, Alexandria was determined. The day she brought her sons home to her tiny apartment was both terrifying and triumphant. 3 second-hand cribs occupied every available space in the main room. Diapers, formula, and baby clothes, all donated by hospital staff, were stacked in organized piles. That first night alone with her 3 sons was a test of endurance. Alexandria moved from crib to crib, feeding, changing, soothing. When all 3 cried simultaneously, she placed them carefully on her bed, lying beside them and humming softly until they settled. In the quiet pre-dawn hours, with her sons finally sleeping, Alexandria gazed at their identical faces. Despite their traumatic early arrival, they were perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes each, and those unmistakable emerald eyes. She thought of Michael in his luxurious corner office, unaware that 3 extraordinary lives had come into the world carrying his genetic legacy. Alexandria gently touched each tiny head, making a silent promise. "I'll give you everything he wouldn't," she whispered. "Not just material things, but courage, compassion, and conviction. You'll grow up knowing your worth isn't determined by others' perception of you." As the first light of morning filtered through the thin curtains, Alexandria carefully placed her sleeping sons in their cribs. Then she opened her laptop and continued building their future, 1 line of code at a time. While she held her 3 sons against her chest for the first time, Alexandria couldn't possibly predict that those same 3 boys would one day stand beside her in a public confrontation that would destroy the empire of the man who had rejected them before they were even born. 1 year had passed since the triplets' dramatic arrival into the world. Alexandria's tiny apartment in the Bronx had transformed into an efficient, if cramped, nursery office home. 3 second-hand cribs lined one wall, each labeled with a name card: Elijah, Isaiah, Emmanuel. The kitchen counter doubled as a changing station. The bathroom shelves overflowed with baby products purchased in bulk during rare sales. And everywhere, on every surface, in every corner, there were reminders that raising 3 infants alone required military-grade organization. Alexandria leaned against the refrigerator, sipping lukewarm coffee as she watched her sons during their synchronized nap time. At 12 months, they had overcome their premature beginnings remarkably well. Though still smaller than average 1-year-olds, they were hitting developmental milestones with determination that made their doctors shake their heads in amazement. Just like their mother, Dr. Chen had commented during their last checkup, defying expectations at every turn. The praise had warmed Alexandria, though she'd deflected it with a modest smile. There was no room for pride or self-congratulation in her life, only forward momentum and survival. Her laptop chimed softly with an incoming email notification. Alexandria moved quietly to the small desk tucked into the corner of the living area, careful not to wake the triplets. Her body ached from another night of interrupted sleep, but her mind remained sharp, focused. The email was from the small tech company that had shown interest in her algorithm, a polite rejection. While your concept shows promise, we don't believe it addresses market needs at this time. Alexandria closed the email without allowing disappointment to take root. It was the 4th rejection in 3 months. Each company saw potential but deemed the investment too risky, especially coming from a young single mother with no formal credentials beyond an undergraduate degree. She turned her attention back to her code, fingers flying across the keyboard. The algorithm had evolved significantly from its early conception. What had begun as a straightforward security protocol had expanded into something more complex, more innovative. But a persistent problem remained, a vulnerability in the encryption that allowed certain sophisticated attacks to penetrate the outer defenses. For weeks, Alexandria had been trying different approaches, each one ultimately failing under rigorous testing. It was like hitting a brick wall repeatedly, hoping to find a weak spot that might not exist. "Come on," she muttered, rubbing her temples. "There's a solution here. I'm just not seeing it." Elijah stirred in his crib, his tiny face scrunching before relaxing back into sleep. Alexandria watched him for a moment, drawing inspiration from his resilience. Her sons had faced seemingly insurmountable odds from their first breath, yet here they were, thriving. Turning back to her screen, Alexandria stared at the lines of code until they blurred before her eyes. She'd been awake since 4 that morning when Isaiah had woken with teething pain. After soothing him, she'd used the quiet hours to work before the day's demands began in earnest. As exhaustion threatened to overtake her, Alexandria decided to take a short break. She closed her laptop and moved to the window, looking out at the Bronx neighborhood that had become home. Children played on the sidewalk under the watchful eyes of grandmothers perched on building stoops. A street vendor called out prices for fresh fruit. 2 blocks down, construction workers renovated yet another building for wealthier tenants, a visual reminder of the gentrification slowly transforming the area. Alexandria's phone buzzed with a calendar reminder. Remote data entry shift, 2 hours. She sighed, stretching her stiff shoulders. The flexible remote work had been a godsend after the triplets' birth, allowing her to earn just enough to cover their modest expenses while staying home with the boys. As she settled back at her desk to begin her shift, a soft cry came from Emmanuel's crib. Alexandria moved to him quickly, lifting his warm body against her chest. "Hey there, little observer," she whispered, using the nickname that had stuck since his NICU days. Of the 3, Emmanuel was the quietest, watching the world with intense focus. "What's got you up early, His emerald eyes, so like Michael's that they sometimes made her breath catch, stared up at her with an intelligence that seemed beyond his months. Alexandria swallowed the familiar pang of grief and anger that came whenever she saw Michael's features in her sons' faces. "Let's let your brothers sleep a bit longer," she murmured, carrying Emmanuel to her desk. She balanced him on her lap as she began her data entry work, one arm securing him while the other typed entries into the law firm's database. Emmanuel watched the screen with fascination, occasionally reaching toward the keyboard with pudgy fingers. Computer scientist in training already? Alexandria smiled, kissing the top of his head. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of invoice numbers and client codes. When her shift ended, Alexandria stretched, feeling the familiar ache in her lower back from sitting too long in her inexpensive office chair. Emmanuel had fallen back asleep against her chest, his breathing deep and even. As she laid him gently back in his crib, Elijah and Isaiah began stirring. Within minutes, all three were awake, demanding attention, food, and diaper changes with varying degrees of urgency. "Okay, team," Alexandria said with mock seriousness. "Let's establish priorities. Diapers first, then bottles, then playtime." The evening routine unfolded with practiced efficiency. Bath time followed by last bottles followed by story time, Alexandria reading from a computer science textbook because children's books were expensive and the library was too far to visit regularly with triplets. "The principles of recursive algorithms," she read in a soothing voice, smiling as her son's eyelids grew heavy. "May seem complex but can be understood through proper decomposition of the problem." By 9:30, all three boys were asleep. Alexandria collapsed onto her small sofa, which doubled as her bed. Her body screamed for rest, but her mind returned to the algorithm problem. She opened her laptop once more, determined to work for just another hour. The clock read 3:17 in the morning when Alexandria bolted upright, a revelation cutting through her exhaustion like lightning. She'd been approaching the vulnerability from the wrong angle entirely. What if, instead of trying to eliminate the weakness, she incorporated it as a feature, a deliberate false entry point that would trap attackers while alerting system administrators? Her fingers flew across the keyboard, translating the concept into code. The solution was elegant in its simplicity, using an apparent vulnerability as a strength. Alexandria worked feverishly, barely noticing as dawn broke and weak sunlight filtered through the window. "Yes," she whispered triumphantly as the simulation ran successfully, the test attack detected and isolated without compromising the system. "It works!" The sound of her excitement woke Elijah, who began to fuss. Alexandria quickly saved her work before attending to him, her mind still racing with implications of the breakthrough. As she prepared the first bottle of the day, her phone chimed with an incoming email. Balancing Elijah on her hip, Alexandria checked it with her free hand, expecting another client assignment from the law firm. Instead, she found herself staring at a message from Professor Zhang at New York University. "Dear Ms. Johnson, I came across your article on encryption vulnerabilities in the Journal of Cybersecurity Forums. Your approach to asymmetric encryption shows remarkable insight. NYU's Cybersecurity Master's program has a scholarship opening for exceptional candidates who demonstrate innovative thinking. I believe you would be an excellent fit. Would you be interested in discussing this opportunity? Sincerely, Dr. Mei Zhang Chair, Cybersecurity Department, New York University." Alexandria read the email 3 times, her heart racing. The article had been a condensed version of her research, published in an online forum under a pseudonym. She hadn't expected anyone to notice it, let alone the chair of NYU's prestigious cybersecurity department. While feeding Elijah, Alexandria drafted and redrafted her response, finally settling on a professional but enthusiastic acceptance of the meeting. She didn't mention the triplets, not out of shame but from hard-earned knowledge that motherhood could trigger unconscious bias in professional settings. 2 weeks later, Alexandria pushed a triple stroller through NYU's campus, drawing curious glances from students lounging on manicured lawns. The boys, dressed in matching outfits purchased from a thrift store and meticulously ironed, babbled happily at the new surroundings. Professor Zhang's office was located in a modern building with glass walls and sleek furnishings. Alexandria took a deep breath before knocking, smoothing her single professional outfit. The same navy skirt and white blouse she'd worn to Anderson Global, now slightly worn but still presentable. The door opened to reveal a petite woman in her 50s with short, stylish gray hair and sharp eyes behind designer glasses. "Ms. Johnson, I presume," she began, then blinked at the triple stroller. "And company." Alexandria straightened her shoulders. "Yes, Professor Zhang. Thank you for meeting with me. I apologize for bringing my sons, but childcare wasn't available today." She braced for dismissal or disapproval, but Professor Zhang merely nodded. "Three at once must be quite the challenge. Please come in." The meeting that followed changed the trajectory of Alexandria's life. Professor Zhang had not only read her article but had tested the principles against current security systems. "Your approach to creating deliberate vulnerability as a trap is unorthodox but brilliant," she said, leaning forward in her chair. "It's exactly the kind of innovative thinking our program encourages." Alexandria managed the conversation while simultaneously distributing snacks to the triplets, wiping small hands, and preventing Emmanuel from dismantling a desk lamp. "The scholarship covers tuition and includes a small stipend," Professor Zhang continued, seemingly unfazed by the controlled chaos. "Classes are flexible, with many offered online or in evening formats." Alexandria hesitated. "Professor, I should be transparent. As a single mother of triplets, my situation is complicated." "Ms. Johnson," Professor Zhang replied, removing her glasses, "I didn't invite you here despite your circumstances, but because of them. Anyone who can develop breakthrough security protocols while raising 3 babies alone has exactly the kind of problem-solving skills and determination we value." 3 months later, Alexandria sat in her first master's-level cybersecurity class, the triplets safely ensconced in a portable playpen at the back of the lecture hall. The other students, mostly young men in hoodies and older professionals seeking career advancement, stared openly. "Is this some kind of joke?" one young man whispered loudly enough for Alexandria to hear. "The lecture hall isn't a daycare center." The professor, a stern-looking man in his 60s, paused his preparation. "Ms. Johnson has made arrangements with the department for her children's presence. Unless they disrupt the learning environment, it should not concern you." The message was clear. Alexandria's presence was sanctioned, but not necessarily welcomed. The implicit challenge hung in the air. Prove you belong here. As the professor launched into his lecture on advanced penetration testing methodologies, Alexandria took meticulous notes while occasionally glancing at her sons. They were unusually quiet, perhaps sensing the importance of this moment. "For our first assignment," the professor announced near the end of class, "you will attempt to breach a simulated banking security system using techniques we'll cover next week. It's designed to be challenging even for experienced professionals." He looked directly at Alexandria. "Ms. Johnson, perhaps you might consider a modified assignment, given your additional responsibilities." Alexandria met his gaze evenly. "That won't be necessary, Professor. I'll complete the standard assignment." As students filed out after class, Alexandria gathered her sons and her notes, mentally calculating how she would find time between feedings, diaper changes, and sleep to complete the challenging assignment. A female student approached hesitantly. "I'm Zoe. Just wanted to say, it's pretty badass what you're doing. If you ever need notes or anything when you can't make it to class." Alexandria smiled, genuine gratitude warming her chest. "Thank you. I might take you up on that." That night, in her tiny apartment, Alexandria sat cross-legged on the floor surrounded by textbooks, while her sons slept in their cribs. The path ahead would be brutally difficult, requiring sacrifices and endurance beyond what she had already given. But for the first time since those devastating moments in Michael's office, she felt something long dormant stirring inside her. Hope. While her classmates doubted that a single mother of triplets could revolutionize digital security, they couldn't possibly imagine that in less than a decade, technology giants would be desperate to implement the Alexandria Protocol in their systems. The spring sun filtered through the windows of NYU's Grand Hall as Alexandria adjusted her graduation cap one last time. In the audience, Three energetic 3-year-old boys clapped with more enthusiasm than coordination, their identical faces beaming with pride they couldn't possibly fully comprehend. "Alexandria Johnson," the dean announced, slightly mispronouncing her name. Alexandria walked across the stage with measured steps, accepting her master's degree in cybersecurity with distinction. As she shook the dean's hand, her eyes found her sons in the crowd, supervised by Zoe, who had become both friend and occasional childcare savior throughout her studies. The journey to this moment had been extraordinary. 2 years of sleepless nights, juggling assignments between feedings, presenting groundbreaking research while managing toddler tantrums. Each obstacle overcome was another silent rebuke to Michael's cruel dismissal of her potential. After the ceremony, Alexandria knelt to embrace her sons, who rushed toward her with the uncoordinated energy only toddlers possess. "Mama did it," Elijah announced, grabbing her tassel with curious fingers. "Big school done?" Isaiah asked, his musical voice already showing the pitch sensitivity that distinguished him from his brothers. Emmanuel simply studied her diploma with intense focus, as if attempting to decipher the calligraphy at age 3. "Yes, big school is done," Alexandria confirmed, kissing each forehead. "And now, we start our next adventure." That adventure began sooner than expected. 1 week later, Alexandria sat in an upscale coffee shop in Soho, nervously adjusting the collar of her one professional blouse. Across from her, Sophia Chen, a striking Asian-American woman in her 40s, examined printouts of Alexandria's algorithm with keen interest. The triplets sat at a small table beside them, remarkably subdued as they focused on coloring books Alexandria had prepared specifically for this crucial meeting. "Your security protocol is unlike anything I've seen," Sophia said finally, setting down the papers. "Most systems build walls. Yours creates a honeypot that actively identifies threats while appearing vulnerable." Alexandria nodded. "Traditional security is reactive. My approach anticipates attacks." "It's brilliant," Sophia stated without embellishment. "I've been funding tech startups for 15 years, and I rarely see something with this much potential." Hope flickered in Alexandria's chest, but experience had taught her caution. "What exactly are you proposing, Ms. Chen?" "Sophia, please." She leaned forward. "I can secure $500,000 in seed funding to develop this into a marketable product. In return, I want 60% ownership of the company we'd form." Alexandria's heart sank slightly. The money would transform their lives. A real apartment, reliable childcare, development resources. But 60% meant losing control of her creation. "I appreciate the offer," Alexandria replied carefully, "but I can't accept those terms. 51% remains with me, non-negotiable." Elijah chose that moment to announce he needed the bathroom. Alexandria excused herself, guiding all 3 boys to the restroom with practiced efficiency. When they returned, Sophia was typing on her phone. "Most people in your position would accept any terms," she observed without looking up. "Single mother, limited resources, no industry connections." "I'm not most people," Alexandria replied, helping the boys back to their coloring. "And this isn't just about me. It's about creating a legacy for my sons." Sophia studied her with new interest. 55% for me, with a clause that returns 5% to you once the product achieves market penetration. 51% remains with me, Alexandria repeated firmly. "I've overcome worse odds than walking away from an unfavorable investment." The silence stretched between them. Finally, Sophia smiled, a genuine expression that softened her sharp features. 49%, but I want board representation and quarterly performance reviews." "Deal," Alexandria agreed instantly, recognizing victory when she saw it. They shook hands over the table while the triplets, sensing the importance of the moment, momentarily paused their coloring to watch. 2 months later, Williams Tech Solutions occupied a single room in a shared office space in Brooklyn. The space contained one computer, a whiteboard covered in code and flowcharts, and a corner dedicated to the triplets with educational toys and small chairs. Alexandria had hired one employee, Derek, a brilliant programmer who accepted a below-market salary for the opportunity to work on revolutionary technology. "The UI needs work," Derek noted, gesturing to the prototype on screen. "It's powerful but not intuitive enough for corporate clients." Alexandria nodded, distracted by Isaiah, who had begun dismantling a clock radio she'd brought for the boys to examine. "We'll need to simplify the user experience without compromising functionality." Nights often found Alexandria asleep at her desk, the triplets in sleeping bags beneath it. On particularly challenging days when bugs refused to be fixed or potential clients canceled meetings, she questioned her decision to refuse Sophia's original offer. Security and comfort for a partial surrender of control seemed increasingly reasonable during moments of exhaustion. During one such night, Alexandria woke to find Elijah sitting beside her laptop, staring intently at a puzzle game she'd installed for the boys. "What are you doing up, little man?" she whispered, careful not to wake his brothers. "Fixing it," Elijah replied with the seriousness only a 4-year-old could muster. He pointed to the screen where he'd successfully completed a logic puzzle designed for children twice his age. Alexandria watched in amazement as Elijah methodically solved another level, his small fingers navigating the trackpad with surprising precision. Where other children might use trial and error, Elijah appeared to analyze the puzzle before making a single move. Similar moments followed with Isaiah and Emmanuel. At their first exposure to a toy keyboard, Isaiah created simple but recognizable melodies, his expression transformed by concentration. Meanwhile, Emmanuel disassembled and successfully reassembled a wind-up alarm clock, examining each component before fitting it back into place. Alexandria established strict routines to balance business development with her son's emerging talents. Mornings began with homeschool lessons she designed herself, unable to afford preschool. Afternoons were dedicated to coding and client meetings, with the boys engaged in educational activities nearby. Evenings included quality time, reading, music, and explorations that nurtured their natural curiosities. 6 months after founding Williams Tech Solutions, Alexandria secured their first significant client, a mid-sized accounting firm concerned about data breaches. The firm's IT director had been skeptical during the initial demonstration. "So you're telling me," he'd said, eyeing the triplets who sat quietly in the corner of the conference room, "that your system intentionally creates apparent weaknesses to trap attackers?" "Exactly," Alexandria confirmed. "Traditional security creates walls that attackers eventually scale. Our approach creates paths they want to take, which then identify and isolate them." When the system successfully repelled a simulated attack during the demonstration, the director's skepticism transformed into cautious interest. "Let's do a 90-day trial." That evening, Alexandria splurged on ice cream ingredients to celebrate with the boys. In their tiny apartment, which now featured a pull-out sofa bed instead of sleeping bags, she taught them to mix cream, sugar, and vanilla in a hand-cranked ice cream maker found at a thrift store. "Is this because of the men in suits?" Isaiah asked, taking his turn cranking the handle. "Yes," Alexandria smiled. "Those men are going to use the security system I built to protect their company's information." "Like a shield?" Elijah suggested, his vocabulary already advanced for his age. "Exactly like a shield," Alexandria confirmed, "and if it works well, other companies will want our shields too." Emmanuel, quiet as always, looked up from where he'd been examining the ice cream maker's mechanism. "Then we get more ice cream?" Alexandria laughed, the sound rare enough that all 3 boys looked up in delight. "Then we get more ice cream, better computers, and maybe someday a bigger home." As they enjoyed their homemade chocolate ice cream, sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, Alexandria felt a contentment that transcended their modest circumstances. "Today is just the beginning, my little ones," she promised, watching their chocolate-smeared faces with overwhelming love. The accounting firm's trial proved successful, leading to their first annual contract. Word began to spread in certain technical circles about the innovative security protocol developed by Williams Tech. Alexandria hired 2 more programmers, expanding into an additional office space where the corner dedicated to the triplets grew proportionally. With each small success, Alexandria tucked away funds, not just for business growth but for a particular purpose that she kept private even from Sophia. In a separate account labeled Future Education, she deposited 10% of every payment, determined that her sons would have opportunities she never did. Sophia, now both investor and mentor, took Alexandria aside after a particularly successful client meeting. "You're building something significant here, Alexandria, but you need to think bigger." "I am," Alexandria assured her. "The next version of the algorithm will adapt to emerging threats automatically." "I'm not talking about the technology," Sophia clarified. "I'm talking about your vision for the company and for yourself." That conversation planted a seed that would grow alongside Williams Tech Solutions. Alexandria began to see beyond immediate survival to long-term transformation, not just of her security protocol, but of the tech industry that had created and reinforced barriers for women like her. On the triplets' 5th birthday, Alexandria surprised them with their first dedicated computer, a refurbished model with educational software and basic programming tools. The boys approached it differently, Elijah immediately testing its capabilities, Isaiah exploring music composition programs, and Emmanuel methodically examining each component before turning it on. As Alexandria watched her sons explore this new tool, she felt the weight of responsibility balanced by expanding possibility. The algorithm that had begun in desperate circumstances on a borrowed laptop was now protecting data for 12 companies, with more expressing interest each month. That night, after tucking the boys into bed in their shared room, Alexandria opened her laptop to review the day's code contributions. A notification appeared, an offer from a larger security firm to purchase Williams Tech Solutions for $20 million. Alexandria stared at the screen, momentarily dazzled by the figure. $20 million would transform their lives instantly. Private schools, a real house, financial security. Yet accepting meant surrendering control of her creation and the future she envisioned building with her sons. Without hesitation, she typed a polite but firm rejection. Some things were not for sale at any price, especially not the legacy she was building for Elijah, Isaiah, and Emmanuel. While sharing homemade chocolate ice cream with her sons during that small celebration, Alexandria couldn't imagine that 7 years later she would be refusing a $2 billion offer for Williams Tech Solutions, determined to maintain control of the empire she was building for her children. The boardroom fell silent as Alexandria concluded her presentation. 30 executives, all men, most over 50, stared at the sleek security dashboard displayed on the wall screen. She stood alone at the head of the mahogany table, a striking figure in her tailored charcoal suit, the only woman and the only black person in the room. "Any questions, gentlemen?" Alexandria asked, her voice carrying the quiet confidence of someone who knew her solution was unmatched. A silver-haired executive leaned forward. "Impressive presentation, Ms. Williams, but these attack simulations, they're theoretical, correct?" Alexandria smiled. At 32, she had grown accustomed to having her expertise questioned. "Actually, Mr. Harrington, those were live attacks against our test environment during this presentation. Your cybersecurity team approved them beforehand." Murmurs rippled through the room. The Williams Tech Solutions security system had intercepted and neutralized every attempt without interrupting Alexandria's demonstration. "I think we've seen enough," said Edward Barnes, the CEO of Finstar Holdings. "Prepare the contracts. We're moving forward." 2 hours later, Alexandria exited the gleaming skyscraper, a signed $50 million contract secured in her briefcase. The largest deal in Williams Tech's 5-year history would expand their security protocol to all 18 of Finstar's international offices. Her driver held the door of the company Tesla. "Home, Ms. Williams?" "Yes, please. The boys will be back from school soon." As the car navigated Manhattan traffic, Alexandria reviewed the day's victory. Williams Tech now protected data for 27 Fortune 500 companies. The algorithm she'd coded while nursing triplets had evolved into the gold standard for corporate security. Her phone chimed with a text from her assistant. "Brownstone paperwork finalized. Keys available tomorrow." Alexandria smiled, allowing herself a moment of satisfaction. The move from their modest apartment to a spacious brownstone in a prestigious New York neighborhood represented more than just financial success. It was a tangible marker of how far they'd come. The car pulled up to their current apartment building. Though significantly nicer than their first Bronx residence, it had still been a transitional space, somewhere between survival and success. Now, at 9 years old, the triplets would each have their own bedroom for the first time. Alexandria found the boys gathered around the kitchen table with their nanny, Elena, who had been with them since they were 5. "Mom!" Elijah exclaimed, rushing to embrace her. At 9, he was already showing signs of the man he would become: confident, analytical, a natural leader among his brothers. "How was the presentation?" Isaiah asked, his fingers still stained with paint from art class. While his brothers gravitated towards science and mathematics, Isaiah's talent for music and visual arts had blossomed under private tutoring. "They signed," Alexandria replied, setting down her briefcase to embrace each son. "And I have news. We can move into the new house this weekend." Their celebration was interrupted by Emmanuel's quiet voice. "Will we have to change schools again?" Alexandria knelt beside her most thoughtful son. "No, sweetheart. I chose the house specifically so you could stay at Westridge Academy, but the commute will be shorter, and you'll each have your own room." The moving day arrived with organized chaos. Alexandria supervised the professional movers while the boys excitedly explored their new home, racing up and down the elegant staircase and claiming bedrooms. "This house is massive," Elijah declared, his voice echoing in the high-ceilinged living room. Alexandria watched her sons with quiet pride. They had never known the desperate days of the Bronx boarding house or the second-hand furniture of their first apartment. Each step up the economic ladder had been carefully managed to shield them from the precariousness of their early years. The new brownstone represented everything Michael Anderson had claimed she could never achieve: prestige, security, success on her own terms. As she unpacked her home office, Alexandria allowed herself a rare moment to reflect on the symmetry. Her new residence stood just 6 blocks from Anderson Global's headquarters, close enough that Michael might even pass it on his daily commute, completely unaware of the lives being lived inside. Monday morning brought the boys' first day at Westridge Academy as residents of their prestigious new neighborhood. Alexandria accompanied them personally, aware of the social dynamics at play. Westridge catered to Manhattan's elite, old money families, corporate executives, celebrities. The Williams boys had attended on scholarship initially, before Alexandria could afford the exorbitant tuition outright. As they approached the imposing stone building, Alexandria noticed the subtle evaluations from other parents, the quick assessment of her Burberry coat, the discreet glance at her Louboutin heels, the double take at her 3 identical sons with their matching leather backpacks. "Mrs. Rothschild," Alexandria greeted a trustee whose husband ran a prominent investment bank. "How was your summer in the Hamptons?" "Ms. Williams," the woman replied with practiced cordiality. "Lovely, thank you. I understand congratulations are in order. Marissa mentioned you've moved to 72nd Street?" The unspoken question hung in the air. How had a single mother affording scholarship spots just years ago managed to purchase property in one of Manhattan's most exclusive neighborhoods? "Yes, we're quite happy with the location," Alexandria replied smoothly. "The boys can walk to their robotics lab at Columbia's engineering department." She omitted that the robotics lab was a weekly enrichment program rather than a dedicated research space. The subtle name drop achieved its purpose. Mrs. Rothschild's eyebrows raised slightly before she excused herself. The classroom dynamics presented different challenges. As Alexandria said goodbye at the school entrance, Elijah hesitated. Jason said his dad told him you can't really be the boss of your company. He confided in a low voice. He said you're probably just the face they put out front because you're a woman and black. Alexandria felt the familiar sting, sharper because it affected her son. And what did you say to that? I told him my mom built the algorithm when she was taking care of us as babies, and that his dad probably couldn't even spell algorithm. Elijah grinned. Alexandria suppressed a laugh. Perhaps a more diplomatic response next time, but I appreciate the sentiment. Throughout the day, Alexandria navigated her company's expansion while organizing the new house and managing contractors for minor renovations. At 3 o'clock, her assistant interrupted a video conference. Ms. Williams, there's a Mr. Thornton from Apex Solutions insisting on speaking with you directly. He says their security system is malfunctioning after implementing our protocol. Alexandria ended her meeting early. Apex was a recent client, one she'd pursued specifically because they had previously contracted with Anderson Global for security services. Mr. Thornton, this is Alexandria Williams, she said, accepting the call. Ms. Williams, we have a situation. Our entire payment processing system is offline after your security update. I understand your concern. I'm looking at your system diagnostics now. Alexandria's fingers flew across her keyboard. The protocol is functioning correctly. It's isolated a potential breach attempt originating from within your network. Impossible, Thornton snapped. I need to speak with whoever actually developed this system, your technical team, not the CEO. Alexandria's voice cooled perceptibly. Mr. Thornton, you are speaking with the developer. The intrusion attempt appears to be coming from a terminal in your finance department, consistent with insider threat patterns. After guiding Thornton through identifying the compromised workstation belonging to a recently terminated employee who had maintained access, Alexandria ended the call with professional courtesy despite his lack of apology. Her afternoon continued with similar challenges: executives who doubted her technical expertise, investors who addressed questions to her male CFO during presentations, clients who requested to speak with the person who really built the algorithm. When she arrived home that evening, Alexandria found Isaiah at the piano, struggling through a complex piece while his music teacher observed with barely concealed frustration. This composition is advanced conservatory level, the teacher explained when she entered. Isaiah insisted he'd created it himself, but that's clearly impossible. It's too sophisticated for a 9-year-old. Isaiah looked up, his expression a mixture of frustration and hurt. I did write it, Mom. I can prove it. Alexandria dismissed the teacher with polite finality. Once alone, Isaiah demonstrated how he'd constructed the piece, explaining the mathematical patterns he'd discovered between certain chord progressions. The world will often doubt what you can create, Alexandria told him, stroking his hair, especially from people who look like us. Your brothers will face this too. That night, after the boys were asleep, Alexandria gathered them in the living room for a conversation she'd been postponing. As we've moved into this new neighborhood, you might notice people looking at us differently, she began carefully. Some may question how we afford this life or whether we belong here. Like Jason's dad, Elijah offered. Exactly. The world will doubt you twice, for being black and for being my sons. People will assume limitations that don't exist. Emmanuel, quiet as always, asked the question Alexandria had been anticipating. Is that why our father left? Because he doubted what we could be? The question hung in the air. Alexandria chose her words carefully. Your father made choices based on what he valued at the time. Those choices reflected his character, not your worth. But he works in technology too, right? Elijah pressed. He must know about Williams' tech. Doesn't he want to know us now? Alexandria met her son's questioning gaze, so like Michael's yet filled with a compassion Michael had never possessed. The world is full of people who recognize value only after it's proven by others. True vision means seeing potential before anyone else. Later that night, Alexandria sat in her home office reviewing a report on Anderson Global's declining market position. The company had failed to innovate after initial success, losing significant clients to more adaptive security firms, including Williams Tech Solutions. Her phone chimed with a notification from her monitoring service, a business news alert mentioning Michael Anderson. The article detailed Anderson Global's third consecutive quarter of losses and speculation about a leadership change. Alexandria closed the alert without reading further. Her interest in Anderson Global was strategic, not personal. The company that had once seemed an unassailable corporate giant now represented a potential acquisition target, one that would give Williams Tech access to markets they hadn't yet penetrated. As she prepared for bed, Alexandria noted the irony. Michael had once claimed she would never be more than a ghetto girl with ambitions beyond her capabilities. Now she was positioning to acquire his struggling company. In her son's rooms, Alexandria checked on each sleeping boy, grateful they would never know the desperation of their earliest days. Elijah's desk was covered with robotics components. Isaiah's room resonated with the quiet hum of his electronic keyboard on standby. Emmanuel's bookshelves overflowed with advanced physics texts no 9-year-old should comprehend, yet he did. As she closed the last bedroom door, Alexandria's phone buzzed with an email from her legal team. Initial assessment complete. Anderson Global increasingly vulnerable to acquisition. Recommend beginning preparations for potential hostile takeover within 24-36 months. Alexandria archived the email for morning consideration. As she prepared for bed in her elegantly appointed master suite, she caught sight of her reflection. No longer the desperate young woman who had once cried on a subway to the Bronx, but a formidable CEO whose name commanded respect in boardrooms worldwide. While Alexandria filed reports on the growing vulnerabilities of Anderson Global, she couldn't know that 3 years later she would be positioned to execute a hostile takeover of the company that once humiliated her, completing a circle of poetic justice that not even the most skilled novelist could have imagined. While Alexandria filed reports on Anderson Global's vulnerabilities, her life continued its relentless forward momentum. 3 years passed in a blur of achievements, milestones, and strategic decisions. Now, at 35, Alexandria Williams commanded a technology empire that had expanded beyond her wildest dreams. From her corner office on the 57th floor of the Williams Tech Solutions headquarters in Manhattan, Alexandria surveyed the city that had once seemed so hostile to her ambitions. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the skyline, including, with a symmetry too perfect to be coincidental, the Anderson Global Tower, now looking slightly less impressive among newer, more innovative companies that had emerged in the past decade. The intercom buzzed softly. "Ms. Williams, the executive committee is assembled in the boardroom for the strategy meeting." "Thank you, Vanessa. I'll be right there." Alexandria gathered her tablet and coffee, catching her reflection in the polished window. The frightened young woman who had once been escorted from the Anderson building by security was unrecognizable in the confident CEO who stood in her place. Designer suit impeccably tailored, natural hair styled in an elegant updo, subtle jewelry that cost more than a year's rent in that first Bronx apartment. The boardroom fell silent as Alexandria entered. 25 division heads and executives rose respectfully, a diverse group she had deliberately assembled to reflect her commitment to changing the face of the technology sector. "Good morning," Alexandria began, taking her position at the head of the table. "Today's agenda includes our expansion targets for the next fiscal year, but first I want to discuss a potential acquisition that's recently become viable." She tapped her tablet, and the Anderson Global logo appeared on the wall screen. Anderson Global is showing significant vulnerability. Their security protocols haven't evolved meaningfully in 5 years, and they've lost 17% of their market share in the past 24 months. Sophia Chen, now Chief Strategy Officer and Alexandria's most trusted advisor, leaned forward. Their stock price dropped another 8% after last quarter's earnings report. Our financial analysis suggests they're ripe for acquisition. Alexandria navigated through slides detailing Anderson Global's financial position, market weaknesses, and strategic value. Acquiring Anderson would give us immediate access to the banking security sector where they still maintain a foothold, despite their declining innovation. The discussion continued for an hour, with division heads raising questions about integration challenges, regulatory concerns, and potential resistance. Throughout, Alexandria demonstrated complete command of every nuance of the proposed acquisition. As the meeting concluded, Sophia remained behind, waiting until the room had cleared. "Alexandria, I need to ask you something that no one else will." Alexandria raised an eyebrow. "Go ahead. Is there any personal motivation in targeting Anderson Global specifically? There are other companies that would give us similar market advantages with fewer integration challenges." The question hung in the air between them. In their 12 years of partnership, Sophia had become more than a business associate. She was perhaps the closest thing Alexandria had to a true friend. Would it be a lie to say there's no satisfaction in the symmetry? Alexandria replied carefully. Of course not, but the decision is purely strategic. Anderson's security infrastructure complements our existing architecture, and their client portfolio fills gaps in our market penetration. Sophia studied her for a moment before nodding. "I trust your judgment. I just wanted to be sure we're moving forward with clear eyes." "My eyes have never been clearer," Alexandria assured her. "This isn't about Michael Anderson. It's about Williams Tech Solutions' future." Later that afternoon, Alexandria's driver navigated through midtown traffic toward Westridge Academy. As the car glided to a stop outside the prestigious school, she spotted her sons, no longer little boys but young men of 12, waiting on the steps. Elijah, already showing signs of the height he would achieve as an adult, led his brothers toward the car. His science project, a functioning robotic arm that could interpret basic sign language, had won the regional competition that morning. "Mom, we got it!" he exclaimed as they piled into the Tesla. "First place and an invitation to the national finals in Chicago." "That's wonderful news!" Alexandria beamed with genuine pride. "I knew your integration of the neural network would impress the judges." Isaiah slid in next, violin case balanced carefully on his lap. At 12, he had already performed with the New York Youth Symphony, his mathematical approach to music composition drawing attention from conservatory scouts. "Ms. Abernathy wants to discuss early application to Juilliard's pre-college program," he mentioned, his voice casual despite the prestigious opportunity. Emmanuel entered last, quiet as always, a dog-eared copy of A Brief History of Time tucked under his arm. Of the three, he remained the most introspective, his brilliance focused on theoretical physics and astronomy. The NASA scientist who spoke at assembly today said my questions about quantum entanglement were graduate level, he shared softly. He asked if I'd consider joining their Young Researchers program next summer. Alexandria absorbed their achievements with a mixture of pride and wonder. Her sons had surpassed even her ambitious expectations, each developing extraordinary talents that set them apart from their peers. Yet despite their academic and extracurricular successes, she had worked diligently to ensure they remained grounded, compassionate, and aware of their privileged position. That evening, over dinner in their spacious dining room, Alexandria made an announcement she had been considering for weeks. "I've been looking at some properties in California," she began, observing their reactions carefully. "I think it's time we expanded our horizons beyond New York." "California?" Elijah echoed, fork pausing midway to his mouth. "You mean like vacation homes?" "Actually, I'm considering a more permanent move. Williams Tech is opening a major office in Los Angeles, and Beverly Hills has exceptional schools that would align with your interests." The boys exchanged glances, the silent communication of triplets who shared a bond beyond words. "What about our friends here?" Isaiah asked, voicing the most immediate concern. "And my astronomy club," Emmanuel added. "We just got access to Columbia's observatory." Alexandria had anticipated their questions. The transition would happen over the summer, giving you time to adjust before the new school year. Beverly Hills High has one of the best science and arts programs in the country, and the Griffith Observatory would welcome a mind like yours, Emmanuel. She didn't mention that the move aligned perfectly with her acquisition plans. Anderson Global's West Coast operations were headquartered in Los Angeles, and being physically present would facilitate the complex negotiations ahead. "Is this about work?" Elijah asked perceptively. "The Anderson acquisition?" Alexandria sometimes forgot how closely her sons followed her business developments. They had grown up in boardrooms and tech conferences, absorbing corporate strategy alongside their formal education. "Partially," she acknowledged, maintaining the honesty she had always prioritized with them. "Being in Los Angeles would position us strategically as Williams Tech expands westward, but it's also about new opportunities for all of us." Later that night, as Alexandria reviewed property listings for Beverly Hills mansions, a notification appeared on her phone, a business news alert about Michael Anderson. The article detailed his desperate attempts to secure new investors after 3 consecutive years of declining revenues. According to industry sources, he would be in Los Angeles the following month, meeting with potential backers. Alexandria closed the alert, a familiar hollowness briefly echoing in her chest. 12 years had passed since that devastating day in his office, yet the memory occasionally surfaced with surprising clarity. His cold voice, the casual cruelty, the dehumanizing escort from the building. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Mom?" Elijah stood in the doorway, his expression unusually serious. "Can we talk?" "Of course, sweetheart." Alexandria set aside her tablet. "What's on your mind?" Elijah sat on the edge of her bed, suddenly looking younger than his 12 years. "I've been thinking about our father lately." The statement hung in the air. Alexandria had always been honest with her sons about their origins, explaining that their father had chosen not to be part of their lives before they were born. She had never named Michael, never shared the full cruelty of his rejection, but had answered their questions with age-appropriate truth as they arose. "What specifically have you been thinking?" she asked carefully. "We're learning genetics in advanced biology," Elijah explained, "about dominant and recessive traits. Our eyes, the green color, it's from him, isn't it?" Alexandria nodded. "Yes, it's a dominant trait he passed to all 3 of you. Our father works in technology, right? That's what you've told us before." "Yes, he does." Elijah's next question cut to the heart of the matter. "Does he know about us? About what we've accomplished? About what you've built?" Alexandria considered her response carefully. "He knows you exist. As for your accomplishments or my company, he works in the technology sector, so he's certainly aware of Williams Tech Solutions. Whether he's made the connection to you 3, I can't say." "Do you think he regrets his choice?" Elijah asked, his voice smaller now. "When he sees what you've become, what we're becoming." Alexandria took her son's hands, noting how they had grown, no longer a child's hands, but showing the first signs of the man he would become. Regret requires self-reflection and accountability. Some people aren't capable of seeing past their own narratives, even when evidence contradicts them. "I used to imagine he would find us someday," Elijah confessed. "Apologize for being absent, but now I'm not sure I'd want that. He didn't want us when we needed him. Why should we want him now?" Alexandria pulled her son into a hug, his head now reaching her shoulder. "You have every right to your feelings about him. All 3 of you do. He made his choice, and we made ours. Our choice led to something extraordinary." After Elijah returned to his room, Alexandria stood at her bedroom window, gazing at the Manhattan skyline. The potential move to Beverly Hills represented more than just a strategic business decision. It symbolized the next chapter in their journey, one that might finally bring her face to face with Michael Anderson after all these years. The following morning, Alexandria called a meeting with her executive team to finalize the Los Angeles expansion plans. By afternoon, she had instructed her real estate agent to arrange viewings of select properties in Beverly Hills. By evening, she had confirmed enrollment information for Beverly Hills High School. As Alexandria stood on the balcony of their New York home that night, watching the city lights flicker against the darkening sky, she couldn't know that in just 2 weeks, fate would orchestrate the encounter she had secretly imagined for 15 years in a manner so public and dramatic that no corporate strategy could have planned it. As Alexandria stood on the balcony of their New York home that night, the magnitude of what lay ahead settled over her. The acquisition of Anderson Global wasn't merely a business transaction. It represented the completion of a circle that had begun 15 years ago in a corner office where a frightened young woman's life had been casually dismissed. The next morning, Alexandria sat at her desk in the Williams Tech Solutions headquarters, reviewing the final details for the Los Angeles expansion. Her executive assistant, Morgan, entered with a tablet displaying the latest Forbes magazine. "I thought you might want to see this, Ms. Williams," Morgan said, placing the tablet on the desk. The headline blazed across the screen. "Anderson Global's Desperate Hour. CEO Seeks 11th Hour Investment in Los Angeles." The accompanying photo showed Michael Anderson, older now with silver threading through his once dark hair, but still handsome in that sharp, predatory way that had once captivated her. His eyes, the same emerald green that her sons had inherited, looked strained. The confidence that had once bordered on arrogance appeared diminished. Alexandria skimmed the article, absorbing key details. Michael would be in Los Angeles for 3 days, meeting with potential investors at the Peninsula Hotel in Beverly Hills. His company had lost 37% of its market value in 18 months. Industry analysts predicted that without significant capital infusion, Anderson Global might face acquisition or bankruptcy within the year. "The timing is remarkable," Alexandria murmured, setting down the tablet. "Should I adjust your Los Angeles schedule to account for this?" Morgan asked. Alexandria considered for a moment. "No. Our timeline proceeds as planned. Forward this to Sophia and the legal team, but otherwise we maintain course." After Morgan departed, Alexandria opened her secure server folder containing the Anderson Global acquisition documents. The paperwork was nearly complete, a hostile takeover meticulously planned over 3 years. On Monday morning, Williams Tech Solutions would announce its acquisition of controlling interest in Anderson Global. The business world would be shocked, financial news would dissect every angle, and Michael Anderson would learn that the woman he had once deemed worthless now owned his company. Alexandria closed the folder and gazed out her office window toward the Anderson building. For a brief moment she allowed herself to imagine Michael's face when he realized what had happened and who was responsible. The fantasy wasn't about revenge, she reminded herself. It was about justice, about consequences finally catching up to actions. Her video conference with European investors began precisely at 10 o'clock. Alexandria's presentation flawless as she outlined Williams Tech's global security strategy. None of the investors would have guessed that beneath her professional demeanor lay thoughts of a confrontation 15 years in the making. By early afternoon, Alexandria had shifted her focus to the family's impending move. The real estate agent had sent virtual tours of 3 potential Beverly Hills properties. Each was magnificent, sprawling mansions with pools, guest houses, and security systems befitting a technology mogul. Alexandria selected the most impressive, a 9-bedroom Mediterranean-style estate with panoramic views of Los Angeles. The property included a state-of-the-art home laboratory that would delight Elijah, a music studio for Isaiah, and an observatory dome for Emmanuel. The purchase would be completed next week, coinciding with the Anderson Global acquisition announcement. As her driver navigated Manhattan traffic toward the Triplet school, Alexandria's phone rang with Sophia's distinctive ringtone. "Have you seen the Forbes piece?" Sophia asked without preamble. Yes, interesting timing. More than interesting, Sophia replied. Our sources say Anderson is desperate, offering equity at significantly devalued rates just to secure operating capital. He doesn't know about our acquisition plans. Alexandria watched the city pass by her window. Monday's announcement will proceed as scheduled. We've waited 3 years to position perfectly. We won't deviate now. There's something else, Sophia continued, her voice taking on an unusual hesitance. Michael Anderson called our office directly today asking to speak with you. Alexandria's heart stuttered briefly before resuming its steady rhythm. What did he want? He wouldn't say specifically. Your assistant informed him you were unavailable. He mentioned something about mutual business interests and left his direct number. 15 years too late for a conversation, Alexandria remarked, her tone deliberately light. If he calls again, maintain the same response. Any communication will happen through proper channels after Monday's announcement. The call ended as the car arrived at Westridge Academy. Alexandria composed herself before exiting the vehicle, adjusting her Hermes scarf against the spring breeze. The school day was ending, students streaming from the imposing building in their pressed uniforms and expensive backpacks. Her sons emerged together, as always, their identical features set apart by their distinct expressions. Elijah animated as he described something to his brothers, Isaiah nodding thoughtfully, Emmanuel observing the world with quiet intensity. "Mom," Elijah called, spotting her, "we thought Harrison was picking us up today." "I wanted to see you myself," Alexandria smiled, embracing each of them. "I have news about our California plans." During the drive home, Alexandria shared details about the Beverly Hills property and their upcoming trip to view it in person. "I've arranged for us to fly out this weekend. We'll tour the house, explore the neighborhood, and you can see Beverly Hills High School." "This weekend?" Isaiah questioned. "But we have finals starting next week. I've spoken with your teachers. You can take preliminary exams tomorrow and complete any remaining requirements remotely." Alexandria squeezed his hand reassuringly. "It's just for 2 days. We'll fly back Sunday evening." Emmanuel, typically the quietest, asked, "Is this trip related to your acquisition of Anderson Global?" Alexandria glanced at her most perceptive son. "The timing aligns with certain business developments, yes, but the primary purpose is for us to see our potential new home." That evening, as Alexandria reviewed the final acquisition documents sent by her legal team, her thoughts drifted to the inevitable confrontation that awaited. For 15 years, she had built her empire while raising 3 extraordinary sons, all without Michael Anderson ever witnessing what he had discarded. Now, on the verge of claiming his company, Alexandria found herself contemplating not revenge, but closure. The completion of a circle that began with rejection and would end with triumph. Her assistant's message arrived just after 9 o'clock. Anderson called again, quite insistent, said it's urgent regarding upcoming announcements. Alexandria's fingers hovered over her phone, momentarily tempted to return the call, to hear his voice after all these years, perhaps detect the desperation he must be feeling as his empire crumbled. Instead, she typed a brief response. "No action required. Proceed with Monday's schedule as planned." Friday morning arrived with unexpected complications. A minor security breach at a client's European office required Alexandria's attention, delaying their departure for Los Angeles. "Morgan, cancel my flight to New York," Alexandria instructed her assistant. "I'll take the boys to Beverly Hills Mall first. We promised a Saturday together before their final exams begin." Morgan looked confused. "But the acquisition documents can wait until Monday," Alexandria finished firmly. "This weekend belongs to my sons. The lawyers can handle any remaining details." By Saturday morning, the Williams family had settled into their suite at the Beverly Hills Hotel. Alexandria had arranged a casual day, shopping at the exclusive Beverly Hills Mall, lunch at a renowned restaurant, then touring their potential new home in the afternoon. "Mom, do I really need another suit?" Elijah complained good-naturedly as they entered the opulent shopping center. Your growth spurt means none of your formal wear fits properly anymore, Alexandria replied, guiding them toward the luxury retailers. Besides, you'll need appropriate attire for the press conference when your robotics project advances to nationals. The Beverly Hills Mall catered to Hollywood's elite and the ultra-wealthy international visitors who frequented the area. Alexandria moved through the space with practiced ease, her Chanel dress and Louboutin heels marking her as a woman accustomed to luxury. The triplets, in their casual prep school attire and limited-edition sneakers, attracted admiring glances from shoppers who recognized wealth even in adolescence. "What about lunch at Spago?" Alexandria suggested as they exited the third boutique, shopping bags accumulated in the hands of a discreet attendant who followed several paces behind. "I hear their truffle pasta is exceptional." The boys were discussing their preferences when Alexandria's phone vibrated with a news alert. "Anderson Global CEO in Beverly Hills for last-ditch investor meetings." She tucked the phone away without commenting, but a strange anticipation flickered through her. The mathematical probability of an accidental encounter in Beverly Hills was negligible, yet the universe sometimes orchestrated coincidences too perfect to be random. "Actually," Alexandria said, changing course, "let's check out the new tech store first. I heard they have some interesting robotics components you might like, Elijah." As they turned toward the mall's east wing, Alexandria didn't notice the man checking his Apple Watch near the Louis Vuitton store, a man whose attention was fully absorbed by the financial disaster unfolding in his company, a man who had no idea that three boys carrying his genetic legacy were about to turn the corner and collide with his carefully constructed reality. The triplets walked slightly ahead, engrossed in a debate about quantum computing that would have been incomprehensible to most adults. Alexandria followed, admiring their passionate intellect, when Elijah suddenly rounded the corner and collided with someone. "Sorry, sir," Elijah mumbled, stepping back and looking up into a face that mirrored his own eyes with uncanny precision. Time seemed to suspend itself in that moment. Alexandria watched as Michael Anderson froze, a primordial recognition flickering across his features as he stared at Elijah. Then his gaze lifted beyond the boy and locked with hers. "Alexandria Johnson?" The words escaped involuntarily from his lips, his expression transforming from confusion to shock. While Alexandria prepared for a simple day of shopping with her sons, she couldn't possibly predict that the next 24 hours would forever change the power dynamic between her and the man who had abandoned her, in a collision of past and present that no algorithm could have calculated. Time crystallized in that moment of recognition. The bustling mall around them seemed to fade away as Alexandria stared into the face she hadn't seen in 15 years. Michael Anderson stood frozen, his expensive suit unable to conceal the shock that transformed his features. "Actually, it's Alexandria Williams now," she corrected, her voice steady despite the thundering of her heart. "It's been a long time, Michael." Michael's gaze darted between her and the three adolescents who now surrounded her protectively. His face paled as understanding dawned. Not just one child, but three. Three boys with his unmistakable emerald eyes, his jawline, his hands. The genetic markers were impossible to ignore. "These are my sons," Alexandria continued, placing her hands on Elijah and Isaiah's shoulders while Emmanuel positioned himself at her side. "Boys, this is Michael Anderson, a former colleague from New York." Michael visibly struggled to process what he was seeing. "Your sons? All of them are..." "Triplets, yes. 15 years old in June," Alexandria confirmed, her smile measured and controlled. The color drained further from Michael's face. "You never told me. You never..." "I tried," Alexandria replied coolly. "You preferred to hand me a check and have security escort me out." A small crowd of curious onlookers had begun to form around them. Alexandria recognized several influential Los Angeles faces, executives, investors, media figures who frequented the exclusive mall. The public nature of this encounter was not what she had planned, but there was a certain poetic justice to it. "Should we go, Mom?" Isaiah asked, sensing the tension building. "In a moment, sweetheart." Alexandria turned back to Michael. "It's interesting running into you here. My legal team has been trying to locate you for days." Michael adjusted his tie, attempting to regain his composure. "Why? What could you possibly want with me after all these years?" Alexandria opened her Hermes handbag and removed a sealed envelope. "As CEO of Williams Tech Solutions, I'm pleased to inform you that we've completed the acquisition of Anderson Global. These documents require your final signature, though they're merely a formality at this point." The murmurs from the gathering crowd intensified. Michael staggered slightly as if physically struck. "Williams Tech? You?" he stammered in disbelief. "You're the founder of Williams Tech?" "I built my company from nothing while raising 3 sons alone," Alexandria responded, extending the envelope toward him. "Your attorneys have already approved the terms. They're quite generous considering Anderson Global's current financial state." "Mother is the principal developer of the WTS Shield algorithm," Emmanuel added proudly. "She revolutionized data security when she was our age." Michael stared at the boys in stunned silence, finally processing the full magnitude of what he had lost. "You're my sons?" A heavy silence fell over the gathered spectators. Alexandria stepped forward slightly, her voice gentle but firm. "Biologically, yes. In every other aspect that matters, no." "Why did you never contact me?" Michael asked, desperation coloring his voice. Quoting your own words, "You'll never be anything more than a ghetto girl with ambitions beyond your capabilities." Alexandria replied evenly. "Why would I seek out a man who considered me disposable?" The assembled crowd gasped collectively. Michael glanced around, recognizing several Anderson Global shareholders among the onlookers, their faces reflecting shock and disapproval. "I was young, arrogant. I made a terrible mistake," Michael pleaded, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "A mistake?" Alexandria laughed softly. "Interesting that you call it that now, when you're losing your company to me and seeing what you rejected. 15 years ago, it was simply your strategic decision." The triplets observed the exchange with remarkable composure, their expressions revealing varying degrees of curiosity and caution. Elijah, always the protector, had positioned himself slightly in front of his brothers. Isaiah studied Michael's face with an artist's eye for detail. Emmanuel quietly analyzed the dynamics unfolding before him. "Alexandria, please." Michael's voice cracked slightly. "Can we discuss this privately? There's so much I need to explain." "There's nothing to explain," Alexandria replied. "Your actions 15 years ago were perfectly clear, as were your priorities. My priority now is giving my sons the Saturday we planned before their final exams begin." She turned to the boys. "Shall we continue to the tech store? I believe they have those quantum computing components you wanted to examine, Emmanuel." Michael stepped forward, desperation overriding his usual calculation. "Wait, please, just 5 minutes." "Mom doesn't owe you 5 seconds, Elijah stated firmly, his young voice carrying the conviction of someone twice his age. Michael flinched at the direct rejection. "I understand you must hate me." "Actually, we don't," Isaiah interjected thoughtfully. "That would require emotional investment. You're a stranger who happens to share our DNA." The clinical assessment from a 14-year-old struck Michael visibly harder than any anger might have. He looked helplessly at Alexandria, the power dynamic between them now completely reversed from their last encounter. "The acquisition will be announced publicly on Monday," Alexandria informed him professionally. "Your presence will be expected at the press conference. Your board has already approved the terms. 78% of voting shares have confirmed. The paperwork merely formalizes the transition." A tall, distinguished man in the crowd stepped forward. Alexandria recognized him as Jonathan Pierce, one of Anderson Global's largest shareholders. "Is this true, Michael? Williams Tech has acquired controlling interest?" Michael's expression contorted briefly before he regained a semblance of professional demeanor. "The situation is complex, Jonathan. There are ongoing negotiations. The negotiations concluded last week, Alexandria interjected smoothly. Your CFO signed the preliminary agreement on Thursday. I have the documentation if anyone would like to review it. Several phones emerged from the crowd as people began capturing video of the exchange. Michael's humiliation was being recorded in real time, soon to become social media fodder for the financial world. Alexandria, Michael tried again, his voice dropping to a plea. What happened between us was business, she finished for him. Just as this is, Anderson Global's security architecture will complement Williams Tech's expansion, and your remaining market share in banking security will fill gaps in our portfolio. It's a sound business decision. Alexandria checked her watch, a platinum Rolex that cost more than Michael had offered her to disappear 15 years ago. Boys, we have a house viewing at 2. We should continue our shopping if we want to make that appointment. As she guided her sons away from the gathered crowd, Michael called after her, They have my eyes. Alexandria paused, turning back to face him one last time. Yes. Fortunately, that's all they inherited from you. The spectators parted to let them pass, many nodding respectfully to Alexandria or offering small smiles of support. The Williams family moved through the mall with dignified purpose, leaving Michael standing alone amid whispers and surreptitious glances. Once they reached a quiet corridor, Alexandria stopped and faced her sons. I'm sorry you had to experience that. It wasn't how I planned for you to meet him. Are you okay, Mom? Elijah asked, concern evident in his expression. I'm fine, sweetheart. Alexandria smiled genuinely. Actually, I feel lighter somehow. Emmanuel, ever perceptive, studied her face. You've been carrying this for 15 years, haven't you? The weight of his rejection. Not his rejection, Alexandria corrected gently. The injustice of it. There's a difference. He looked broken, Isaiah observed, when he realized who we were, who you are now. Alexandria nodded. Success is a powerful equalizer, but I don't want you to think this was about revenge. The acquisition is a sound business decision that benefits our company. And the timing? Elijah asked with a knowing half-smile. Let's call it karma with excellent market sense, Alexandria replied, her eyes crinkling with genuine humor. They continued their shopping, though the encounter had shifted the day's energy. Alexandria maintained her composure, guiding them through stores with practiced ease, but her mind replayed the confrontation repeatedly. Michael's face when he realized who she was, the shock when he understood that the triplets were his sons, the dawning horror as he grasped that she now controlled his company's fate. During lunch at an exclusive restaurant, Alexandria received a text from Sophia. Videos of the mall encounter going viral in financial circles. Board members calling emergency meeting. Monday's announcement may need to be accelerated. Alexandria set her phone aside, focusing on her son's animated discussion about the house they would soon visit. The business implications could wait. This moment belonged to her family. As they finished dessert, Emmanuel asked the question she had been anticipating. Will we have to see him again? At the press conference or other events? Alexandria considered her response carefully. That's entirely your choice. You're old enough to decide what relationship, if any, you want with him. I won't influence that decision either way. I don't think I want one, Elijah stated firmly. He had 15 years to find us if he cared. Isaiah nodded in agreement. It would feel transactional now, like he's only interested because of who we've become, not who we are. Emmanuel remained quiet for a moment longer. I'm curious about him scientifically, nature versus nurture and all that, but I don't feel any emotional connection. Alexandria reached across the table, squeezing each of their hands in turn. Whatever you decide now or in the future, I'll support you. People can change, but that doesn't obligate you to participate in their redemption stories. As they left the restaurant, Alexandria's phone buzzed with a notification that security cameras had captured Michael Anderson entering the Beverly Hills hotel bar alone, looking visibly shaken. While the murmurs of shocked spectators grew around them, Alexandria couldn't predict that the consequences of this public confrontation would be far more devastating for Michael than any hostile takeover could have been. The court of public opinion would prove far more merciless than any corporate boardroom. Alexandria watched the videos spread across social media with clinical detachment. By Sunday morning, the confrontation at Beverly Hills Mall had been viewed over 3 million times. Financial news sites ran headlines like, "Tech CEO discovers secret triplets during hostile takeover," and "Williams Tech founder reveals shocking past with Anderson CEO." The business world's weekend chatter centered entirely on the encounter, with commentators dissecting every word, every expression, every implication. In her hotel suite, Alexandria sipped her coffee while scanning the coverage on her tablet. The triplets were still asleep in the adjoining room, exhausted from yesterday's emotional intensity and the subsequent tour of their potential new home. Her phone lit up with Sophia's call. "The board has scheduled an emergency meeting for 9 a.m., Sophia reported without preamble. "Anderson Global's stock is expected to drop significantly when markets open tomorrow." "How significantly?" Alexandria asked, her voice steady. "Analysts are predicting 30 to 40%. The videos? They're devastating, Alexandria. The way he dismissed you, the casual cruelty, it's all anyone in finance is talking about." Alexandria set her cup down carefully. "Move the press conference to tomorrow morning before markets open. We'll announce the acquisition as planned, but accelerate the timeline." After ending the call, Alexandria moved to the window, gazing out at the palm-lined streets of Beverly Hills. The confrontation had unfolded differently than she'd imagined during those rare moments she'd allowed herself to envision it. There had been no triumphant speech, no dramatic denouncement, just the simple power of truth, laid bare before witnesses who understood exactly what it meant. A soft knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. Elijah stood there, already dressed, his expression serious beyond his 14 years. "I saw the videos online," he said quietly. "They're everywhere." Alexandria nodded. "I know. I'm sorry if it's uncomfortable for you." "I'm not uncomfortable," Elijah replied, surprising her. "I'm proud. You faced him with such dignity, Mom. You didn't need to destroy him. His own words did that." By noon, the family had returned to their scheduled activities, touring the Beverly Hills mansion that would soon be their home. The Mediterranean-style estate sprawled across 2 acres, featuring everything Alexandria had specified: Elijah's lab, Isaiah's music studio, Emmanuel's observatory. As the real estate agent detailed the property's features, Alexandria found herself occasionally distracted by incoming messages about Anderson Global's impending collapse. That evening, as they prepared to return to their hotel, Emmanuel paused in the mansion's entryway. "I think I would like to meet him properly," he said quietly. Alexandria turned to her most introspective son. "Michael?" Emmanuel nodded. "Not as a father figure, just to understand. There are questions about heritability and environmental influences that interest me from a scientific perspective." "If that's what you want," Alexandria replied carefully, "I won't stand in your way." By Monday morning, the storm had intensified. Alexandria woke to news alerts that Michael Anderson's fiancée, Catherine Reynolds, the heiress whose family connections had been part of his calculation 15 years ago, had publicly ended their long engagement, her spokesperson citing revelations about Mr. Anderson's character that made the relationship untenable. The Williams family dressed formally for the press conference. Alexandria chose a cream Armani suit that contrasted elegantly with her skin, projecting authority without aggression. The triplets wore matching navy blazers with different colored shirts underneath, subtle individualization within their identical appearance. As their car approached the Peninsula Hotel where the announcement would take place, Alexandria's phone rang. The caller ID displayed a number she didn't recognize. "Williams," she answered crisply. Alexandria. Michael's voice sounded ragged, desperate. Please, 5 minutes before the press conference. Alone. She considered declining, but calculated that facing him privately first would be advantageous. Room number? Presidential suite, top floor. The elevator ride was silent, Alexandria mentally preparing for whatever tactics Michael might employ. When she reached his door, she paused to check her reflection in a hallway mirror, composed, confident, commanding, the antithesis of the frightened young woman who had stood trembling in his office 15 years earlier. Michael opened the door immediately to her knock. The contrast between them was stark. Where Alexandria radiated polished success, Michael looked disheveled despite his expensive suit. His eyes were bloodshot, his complexion sallow, his posture diminished. "Thank you for coming," he said, stepping aside to let her enter. The presidential suite was littered with evidence of a sleepless night. Scattered papers, empty coffee cups, a half-empty bottle of scotch. 5 minutes, Alexandria reminded him, remaining standing. Michael ran a hand through his unkempt hair. "Everything's falling apart. Catherine left. The board is voting on my removal this afternoon. The stock will collapse when markets open." "Yes," Alexandria agreed simply. "Actions have consequences, Michael. Sometimes they take 15 years to arrive." "You destroyed everything I built," he accused, a flash of his old arrogance surfacing. "No," Alexandria corrected calmly. "I acquired a company with valuable assets and declining leadership. The destruction you're experiencing is the natural result of your own choices being exposed." Michael paced the room, agitation visible in every movement. "Those boys, my sons, they look at me like I'm nothing to them." "You are nothing to them," Alexandria confirmed. "That was your choice, not theirs." "I want to make it right," he insisted, stopping before her. "I have resources, connections. I could give them opportunities." "They don't need your opportunities," Alexandria interrupted. "Elijah's robotics innovations are being reviewed by MIT researchers. Isaiah's musical compositions are being performed by symphonies. Emmanuel's theories on quantum entanglement have been published in scientific journals. What exactly could you offer that they don't already have?" The question hung in the air between them. Michael's expression crumpled as the truth of her words registered. "A relationship with their father," he finally answered, his voice barely audible. "Fatherhood isn't a title you can claim when convenient," Alexandria replied. "It's a commitment, a daily investment of 15 years that you explicitly rejected." A knock at the door interrupted them. Alexandria checked her watch. Her 5 minutes were up. "That will be my sons," she said. "Emmanuel expressed interest in meeting you properly before the press conference." Michael straightened immediately, smoothing his hair and adjusting his tie. When Alexandria opened the door, all 3 boys stood in the hallway, composed and serious in their matching blazers. "Boys," Alexandria said calmly, "Mr. Anderson has a few minutes before we need to head downstairs." They entered the suite with measured steps, standing together as they had at the mall, a united front despite their individual curiosities. Michael stared at them with naked longing that made Alexandria's heart twist unexpectedly. Not for him, but for her sons who had deserved a father willing to love them from the beginning. "I'm your father," Michael stated, his voice cracking slightly. "Biologically speaking," Emmanuel corrected, echoing his mother's words from the mall. "I'd like to get to know you better, to make up for lost time," Michael continued desperately. Elijah, direct as always, responded first. "Why? Because you discovered we're the sons of the Williams Tech CEO? Or because you genuinely care about us? Maybe he needs jobs when the acquisition is finalized," Isaiah suggested with biting irony. Michael paled. "That's not fair. You don't know me." "Exactly," Emmanuel agreed. "And that was your choice, not ours." Alexandria observed the exchange with quiet pride. Her sons had learned to value character above convenient connections, to recognize the difference between genuine remorse and desperate self-preservation. Williams Tech has an excellent internship program, Alexandria offered, closing her laptop. In a few years, when they finish college, perhaps they might consider your resume, Mr. Anderson. Based on merit? Naturally. Michael's defeat was visible in every line of his body. He finally understood the magnitude of what he had lost. Not just a corporate empire, but the extraordinary family he had rejected. The triplets' indifference cut deeper than any hostility could have. "What can I do to prove I've changed?" he asked desperately. Alexandria rose, signaling that the conversation was over. "Perhaps start by treating every ghetto girl with ambitions you meet with the respect they deserve. As for us, we're doing just fine exactly as we are." The descent to the hotel's grand ballroom was silent, the four Williamses presenting a united front as they prepared to face the press. Alexandria felt no triumph over Michael, only gratitude for the path that had brought her here. The rejection that should have destroyed her had instead catalyzed her transformation. As she stepped onto the podium to announce the acquisition of Anderson Global, Alexandria surveyed the packed room of journalists and industry analysts. Michael stood at the back, diminished but present as required by the terms of the takeover. "Good morning," Alexandria began, her voice strong and clear. "Today marks a new chapter for Williams Tech Solutions as we announce the acquisition of Anderson Global, expanding our security infrastructure and client portfolio." Her professional delivery revealed nothing of the personal history behind the transaction. This wasn't about revenge. It was about building a future that honored the journey that had brought them here. That evening, as they flew back to New York on the Williams Tech private jet, Alexandria reviewed the final acquisition documents while her sons discussed their impressions of Beverly Hills. Michael Anderson would remain forever the man who lost everything by underestimating a woman he considered inferior, while Alexandria Williams would move forward as she always had, with dignity, purpose, and the unconditional love of three extraordinary sons who were her true masterpiece. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen.